Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, God is one. Amen. Well, good morning from an extremely muggy, sultry, hot, airless Lincoln. I've been complaining about people who think that it's difficult to wear a mask. Though I know some people have no choice but to find that difficult, but some people I know very well don't. And yesterday I was wearing a mask in the church, and I thought, if I carry on wearing this thing for another minute, I'm going to faint. It was so clammy and so difficult and so airless behind this thing. I think, oh, I'm getting faint, I'm getting faint. So I repent of all my unkind thoughts about other people that I had before. There we go. Yeah, yes, it does feel. Well, Tracy said hell and hello, but actually it did feel a bit like hell yesterday. It was far too warm. Good morning, Maria Helena and Emma and Tracy. Good evening. And Tony, good morning in sunny Ireland. Possibly pouring with rain there, I don't know. Never mind. Today we're going to be looking at a little tiny passage that usually gets overlooked. Good morning, Phoebe. It's a very short little thing, and it's in chapter 6 of Mark, verses 53 to 56. So just 3 verses. Good morning to Margaret and to Borada, to Anthony in Wales. And good morning, Melengath and Maria. Good morning. Thank you very much indeed, Maria. You also have a good day. And also Judy. Let's read it. The story so far is that the 5,000 have been fed. They've had a very busy day. They've been rowing like mad. It says here, my connection is unstable. Wait till I try and reconnect you. I don't know why that should be. How very annoying. Good morning, Father Alexander. Your prayers. Your prayers asked you. Yeah, so the story so far is 5,000 people being fed. And they've been rowing all night. And somebody made a very good comment on that yesterday, so it might be worthwhile looking back. I was very impressed and very interested. It was about the whole business of people doing weightlifting, weight training, that partly it's a matter of your mind. And people have 30% more ability than they think they do. So anyway, read what they said. It's far better than me trying to paraphrase it. So verse 53 of Mark chapter 6. When they had crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret and anchored there. And when they came out of the boat, immediately the people recognized him, ran through that whole surrounding region, and began to carry about on beds those who were sick to wherever they heard he was. Wherever he entered, into villages, cities, or the country, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and begged him that they might just touch the hem of his garment. And as many as touched him were made well. Now, isn't that interesting? It's such a little throwaway thing. It has got a lot in there that I think we can pay attention to. And actually, Father Alexander Haig is the sort of person who's paying attention to this the entire time. Has some very good ideas about mission, evangelism, and so on. So it might be worthwhile if Father Alexander gave us some of the places to look where he's written various articles and had ideas in the past. This is an interesting passage, partly because it tells us sort of the day-to-day life of the Lord. You know, what did he get around doing? What happened as a normal thing? Okay, so we've had about a year rushing from all the villages to find him. So let's go bit by bit. The first bit is very matter of fact. They crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret, and they anchored there. That's just south of Capernaum. So 4 or 5 miles south towards there for about another 50 miles. It's a flat plain. It's a very fertile area. It was full of little villages and hamlets, and quite well stocked with people. So there's a large population of folk there. And clearly there must have been plenty of them who were ill. And although it says here, they anchored there, in the Greek it says they drew up their boat, so that it pulled their boat ashore and left it on the shore. And they left it there, and off they go. Now, if you get a map and you have a look at the area that they went around, now there's some you can find on Google that pinpoint each of the different places where the Lord does something. When you do that, you see that the Lord only really went over a very small area. It's surprising, really, how tiny an area. And if you go out, of course, and look at Israel at the time, or even Israel now, you see that it's a tiny area. It's a bit like wandering around one reasonably sized county in this country. So let's say wandering around Shropshire or wandering around Herefordshire, that sort of thing. Not near the main capital, but wandering around, or maybe Berkshire, somewhere like that. So within reach of Jerusalem, but not a particularly important area of the world, and not even a very important area, not very important area of the world. And when the Lord gets out of the boat there, everybody recognizes him. And it says a really good thing in verse 55. They ran around all that country. So having discovered the Lord was there, they didn't want to keep this to themselves. They went charging off in all directions, a bit like my younger brother used to do. Whenever anything came on television that was nice, we're talking about a long time ago now, so the early 1960s, so around about 1963, 4, 5, I remember Sooty and Sweep would come on, and my younger brother couldn't bear it that nobody else was going to enjoy it as much as he was because they weren't going to be there in the room. So he had run out of the drawing room and run down the corridor shouting, "Sooty and Sweep, Sooty and Sweep," so that we'd all be able to gather together and watch it with him. And that's more or less what it is that these people are doing. The Lord has turned up, and they're racing through the country, not shouting Sooty and Sweep, but most of you are far too young to be able to remember Sooty and Sweep, running throughout the country in order to shouting, "Jesus of Nazareth is here, Jesus of Nazareth is here, bring out your ill." So they did. Compare that with our average Orthodox congregation, where so many people are embarrassed even to mention that they might go to church on Sundays, even if asked, or they do it apologetically, and they don't invite people to come with them and say, "Yes, well, you should see what I have found. I have found a pearl of great price, and I'm willing to give everything for it. I have found treasure in a field, and I'm going to buy that field, and I'm going to distribute that treasure to everybody I meet." Apart from that, we very quietly sort of leave our house in the morning and go off and make as if nothing, and make sure the children go and have their riding lessons or whatever else takes precedence over meeting with God. And delighted that God has turned up in their area. Just compare that with the people from Gergesa. Just compare that with the people from Gergesa who asked the Lord to get out of the place. And it appears they had a real concern for those people who were less than they were. And again, I have to say, compare that with so many people who come to our congregations, where there are, there's not a burning desire for the sick, the poor, those who are oppressed, those who are suffering. There's not a burning desire in our hearts for those people who are homeless, those who are marginalized, those on the very edge of society. And in these days, the days we're talking about with the Lord, if you were ill, if you were invalid, if you were sick, if you were poor, you were discarded. They didn't have much time or ability to look after those people who could not work hard, who could not till the fields, who could not carry to market. So they're left to one side. And those people were disabled. Yes, thank you, Tracy. But what did they do? It says they brought the people on their krabaton. A krabaton is a sort of mat, a bit more than a mat. What have I seen that's similar? It says in some translations they're beds, but it's not really a bed. In some it says on stretchers, not really a stretcher either. It's a sort of woven mat. You can pick up the corners and pick that up and take it. I've seen people lying in the street in Peshawar in Pakistan on a krabaton, just a woven mat, flat, completely flat, nothing really between that and the pavement. But you could pick it up. You could carry somebody who is disabled like that. Yes, Margaret O'Shea, I'm inclined to agree. And they carry rather extraordinary idea of people turning up with their sick and think, oh no, he's gone on to the next village, and rushing off to the next place to try and find him there. Those who are sick, those who are disabled, those who are in need, and come to him. What does it say? It says something rather wonderful in verse 56. By the way, we can bring the Lord enthusiastically in prayer, rather the other way around. We can bring people to the Lord enthusiastically in prayer. You know, we don't need to bring the Lord to our house. That's what happened previously, but now people bring their sick to the Lord, to where he is. Even, it says, to the villages, and to the cities, and to the fields, and to the marketplaces. The marketplace is actually rather interesting, verse 56. We need to be on the lookout for marketplaces. Now, a marketplace was not just where people bought and sold stuff, but it was actually somewhere where trade and commerce went on, and where things were bought and where they're sold. But it was also a place where people sat in the shade and had discussion and dialogue. And dialogue assumes you talked with each other and you listened. It was the place for local politics. It's where any naughty people were dragged in order to have a punishment dealt out to them or judgment. When I was a child living in Afghanistan, Babrek, who worked with us, he worked in the house, brought a pow weight of bread from the market, from the baker, and he brought it into the kitchen, and he weighed it on my mother's scales. And to his horror, this bread was 1 ounce less than a pound. So he carried the scales and the pound and the bread, and he carried them off into the marketplace in the center of our little village, and he set them down there, and he called the policeman came, and they weighed the bread, and the whole town was livid about this because it looked as if the baker had been cheating everybody. And they rushed off down to the bakery, and they grabbed the baker, and they frog-marched him into the middle of the town, and they shook him, and then the policeman ticked him off and smacked his face on both sides and sent him off with a flea in his ear. And everybody nodded and said, okay, he's been treated justly. And then Barbara came back with the bread and the pound weight and the scales and told us what he had done. And the more the story increased, the more horrified we all were, because an Afghan pow is exactly 1 ounce less than an English pound. So the poor old baker had been wrongly treated. Anyway, when we said this, to Barbrek, a name which meant tiger, and a more meek and gentle person you could not meet, Barbrek said, Barbrek, what have you done? No, the baker, that's the correct weight. It's 1 pow. So it's one pow. He didn't do anything wrong. Baruch said, malish, never mind. Peru nest. It'll just make him more careful in future. Oh dear. Justice, eh? Anyway, that's completely off the point. Yeah, it was a court. There's somewhere also where the children went and played. I used to go and play in the Agora too. There's also where people who were bone idle and sat around drinking their equivalent of tea, don't know what they drank, and also where people looking for jobs would also sit in that Agora. And so it was a great place for the Lord to go. And you found also St. Paul and St. Peter going to the Agora all over the place, the marketplace, in order to preach, because you had a ready audience. And we also need to think about where our audience might be, who's going to be listening. Most of us who preach, as the Americans say, preach to the choir. The people who are already so committed that they're not only there, but they're singing in the choir as well. Well, this morning I got a text from the local BBC Radio Lincolnshire asking me to contact them because they'd like me to go on and do a talk. So that's part and parcel of the Agora, or the internet, although actually one tends to be talking to the choir here too, television, radio, but anywhere really where people are. And the question is, where really are they? And sometimes you know, even things like Facebook, I particularly like it actually when somebody puts one of those thumbs down on these talks. It means that somebody who didn't like it actually listened. Maybe they didn't listen, maybe they just didn't like it, looked at it and didn't like it. I know there are quite a number of people who do that sort of thing. But we need to look out also for those sorts of places that are the Agora, the place where people gather, where they're willing to enter into discussion and dialogue, where they're willing to argue with you, when they're willing to listen to what you say. And what do these people in the marketplace do? So they laid the ailing at his feet, and they pleaded with the Lord. Parakalin, actually, the same as parakalo in Greek, please, pleading with the Lord, that even they might touch the fringe. Do you remember that lady who she puts her finger through the crowd and she touches the edge of the hem. Okay, the edge of the hem. And they're pleading with the Lord. And it says that his outer garment, a sort of cloak, big t-shirty thing. And they're all healed. And that, again, emphasizes the importance of even people on the very edge of our community. They could hardly be further away from the church unless they stepped beyond it completely. Even them, putting out their finger very tentatively, touching the very edge of the robe of Christ, they find healing too. So it's not just the priest and the choir and the servers, not just the people who come and they sit in the front row, not those people who are always there every time you open up the church, they pile in. Nice little story about that too, but I'm not going to tell it. They pile in. Not those people who are members of the parish council, not just them. Not those people you can absolutely rely on to do the things that need to be done, but those people who only come very occasionally. The ones who always say, you ought to have some change. Every time I come, you always say Christ is risen. Or every time I come, you always have the same Christmas service, It should change. Do something a bit different. And they've only come once a year. Even those people, they're the ones that are putting out their finger and just touching the very edge of the robe of Christ. And they too are finding his healing and his blessing. Okay, picture of everyday life. What did the Lord do? How did he get on when he went and did these missionary journeys? How did it turn out? Well, that's how it turned out. The people went running all over the place, and they brought to him their sick on their little cravaton, on their little mats, and he healed them all, even if they only touched the very fringe of his raiment. Let's see who's here. People are horrified by my story. I expect the poor old baker was quite horrified. We carried on buying bread from him, though. It was delicious bread. Absolutely wonderful bread. Andrew says, true evangelism perhaps should not be forced. Goodness and joy is infectious. Yeah, it needs to come from within you. You cannot pretend to be joyful. And sometimes it's much better to make it clear that actually today I'm absolutely cream cracker. I was sick to death, a lot of you. Push off. Had enough. Go away. I need to go and find myself a mountainside to go and pray on. Never mind. Phoebe says, yes, the local teacher, the equivalent of primary school. The Jewish people were actually very well educated, very literate at that time. Good morning, Marlena. God bless you. The baker was vindicated, but unfortunately is not vindicated publicly. They just decided to make him more careful. Andrew, there's always a hater. Yes, but thank God for the people who hate. You know, I only became a Christian because I read Mark's Gospel. I read Mark's Gospel because what I had heard about Christianity that day sounded so abysmal and awful and ghastly and nasty, and a cruel and vindictive and horrible God from this evangelical minister who should have known better, that I decided that I'd read Mark's Gospel in order to fuel myself up with the energy to be able to fight Christianity, because it was clearly something that was nasty, unpleasant, and needed to be defeated. And 2.5 hours later, I found that I had been converted. And far from discovering that this hateful, nasty, vindictive, unpleasant God, I had found the person of Christ. And I knew then that I wanted to follow him. And that actually is the whole the rest of my story. I've often wondered what would have happened to me had I not reacted so strongly against this message that I was given. Maybe I'd have gone through life tolerant of religion, but in no way attached to Christ. Thunderstorms in Cumbria, woo. I rather love a thunderstorm. We don't get them like they do in Lebanon. In Lebanon, you see them coming in from the sea, crack like huge, great sailing ships with these wonderful, amazing clouds and rushing down upon you with cracking and bursting and thundering and light crashing everywhere. And then it's upon you in a huge torrents of rain. It's wonderful. Father Alexander, don't be able to post a link here to what I've written. I will send it to you. There are 2 Alexander Haigs. I'm the younger. Maybe when this is finished, Father Alexander, you could post it underneath, down here, in the comments underneath. That would be helpful for people, I think, because what you've written is actually very important. It's a shame that not more people are paying attention to it, because you've done a lot of good work there. The sick and the secularized, yes, talk to them. Okay, thumbs up, Maria. God bless you. Metropolitan Anthony became a Christian after reading Mark's Gospel. Yes, and actually it is very interesting, because when I read his description of it, I recognized that I had had exactly the same experience, that I knew that I was in the presence of God. And it's really interesting to read Metropolitan Anthony of blessed memory, his account of becoming a Christian. He also read Mark's Gospel. I did too. I read it because it's the shortest of the Gospels. And I didn't want to waste any time that I didn't need to. I had many better things to get on with, like shooting things. Oh, no, you don't really want to have a thunderstorm in your camping. I remember doing so once, not far away from the monastery. And there was this young lad from a war-torn country, beautiful boy, and his beautiful sister. And they had been in a war-torn country, and suddenly the thunder came. And they were terrified because, of course, that sort of loud noise meant bombs and guns to them. And that was a shocking thing to see. They quite literally ran and they jumped into some of the adults' arms to be helped. And these were not little kids, they were in their early teens. Well, Tracy, there we go. God bless you. Have a good night. I'm not sure, have you sent us any animals and plants and flowers today, Tracy? No, you haven't. What's wrong with us? You don't love us anymore. Okay, have a good night. God bless you. And everybody else, God willing, talk to you tomorrow. Your prayers. Pray for each other. And I'm going to go and look for this end stream button, which I think I have to put this in. Ah, yes, there we go. It pops up. Okay, God bless you. Your prayers. Still not come up. There we go.